Medical schools, of course, have vast amounts of student data and data on student performance. And the question we asked ourselves was whether we could use this data to develop a comprehensive learner profile which we could share with the learner and which they could use to actually develop their own learning journey. But numbers alone, of course, actually only provide a very limited image. And if you look at the image on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see what it is. It's obviously a face of a young lady, but it's not clear. And I think you couldn't actually decide who it was from this picture. However, we have got other data in addition to assessment grades. We have a large amount of narrative feedback on performance. And we wanted to look at text analytics to see if we could provide a more complete picture than just numbers alone. And that would, of course, allow us to provide the picture that you see on the right-hand side of this slide, which is of Marie Curie, and gives you a much more detailed representation of her. So our vision was to take all the data that we have, and you can see some of it here, which is exam-based assessment, OSCE assessment, clinical skills feedback, project feedback, and resource uses, that is what resources they're using at in the medical school, and to provide that back to students in a way which was visually understandable and visually appealing, and so that students could actually use that to look at how they would go forward, to identify areas of strength and areas for development. It was important to us that we actually did this in co-design with students and tutors, and my colleague will talk about the co-design methods later on. I'm now going to introduce my colleague Alicia Petrakovic, who did the textual analytics.
The challenge in using the quantified self approach is trying to find deeper meaning in the data. And we want to get a more holistic view of the learning process of our students. To do that, we make use of data analytics. In particular, we focus on two types. Firstly, text analytics, for example, narrative feedback that students get, so that we can understand more of the context of the assessment. Secondly, we use temporal analytics in order to get a longitudinal view of the data to track students' progress.
Co-production and co-design with students and tutors was very important to us, as many times in the past we've built resources that students really haven't found very helpful. And so I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rosie Dent-Spargo to talk about what we did in co-production and co-design.
So over the last few months on myPAL, we've had two phases of co-design. In both phases, we've worked with students, with clinicians out on placements, and with academics. So in phase one of this co-design, we were really focusing on the sort of patterns that we thought might be useful for us to represent to students in myPAL. So what we did in the sessions was we gathered around a big table with lots of pens and papers. We brainstormed what the patterns might be that we might be able to present to students with their data. And then after we'd kind of established what those were, students and clinicians and academics got out pens and paper and designed the visualizations. So throughout the sessions in phase one, we got 50 visualizations. It was an incredibly rich amount of data. After phase one, we went and grouped those visualizations and we categorized them. And what we did was we boiled down these 50 visualization ideas into 3 clickable paper prototypes. We chose paper prototypes for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're quick and easy to do, and very easy to make any changes to. And also they help manage expectations by not looking too complete. So in phase two, we did another round of workshops with the same groups of people, and we went through each of the 3 prototypes, playing with them, clicking through them, and thinking about any changes or additions that could be made to those.
So I hope you can see that the myPAL project, the Personal Adaptive Learning Project, will help students to contextualise the results of their assessments, to develop a holistic awareness of their progress through the course. It will also help them to identify their areas of strength and areas for development by recognising and seeking and be able to interpret the feedback that they're getting. I'd now finally like to hand over to my colleague Vanya Dimitrova, who is the research lead for the myPAL project, to explain what future research directions we're taking the project in.
Our future directions are to realize the ambitious vision of providing a digital companion for personalized adaptive learning. As Rosie pointed out, right now we are implementing the visualizations from phase 2, which will be the first stage of providing prompts for self-regulation. In the future, we will also provide intelligent interventions, which will accompany the visualizations to provide, to further promote self-regulated learning. We are developing this by tapping into data and bringing artificial intelligence techniques. This goes into two directions. On the one hand, we are analyzing the data to see if we can note any useful patterns, which will be for the students or for the tutors, and will be helpful to trigger the self-regulation and also be useful for the mentoring process. So we're looking at using process mining to identify notable common paths of going through the material, going through, for example, placements, and this is at a cohort level. We also are looking at using text analytics methods to look into the feedback which is given to the students to identify whether there are any notable patterns within the feedback. For example, a particular skill which has been practiced, or probably giving too short feedback or probably too lengthy feedback. We're also looking at the student's action plan to see if we can identify any notable patterns within the action plan. For example, lack of confidence, or not being reflective, not being actually putting concrete actions in place. Our second direction is to bring in recommendations to the students of resources which other students or the tutors have found useful. In this way, we will tap into the behavior of other students, things which others have found useful, in order to be able to help the students manage their learning. As a whole, in summary, we are using artificial intelligence techniques, tapping into the data in order to realize our vision of digital companion for personalized adaptive learning.
I'd like to acknowledge the myPAL team, of course. There are a considerable number of people involved in this project, and I hope to be able to be with you in person shortly when I get through the immigration queue. Thank you very much.